Well, good morning, everyone. It is great to see all of you this morning. And today I am very excited to begin a brand new message series called Seasons. And the title for the series comes from the idea that all of us go through seasons in life. So the question I have for you as we get started, just to help you get a handle on where we're going in this series, is what season of life are you in today? Well, we all go through seasons. They come and they go. But today, right where you're at, what season of life are you in? Because if you're in middle school or high school, just so you know, you won't be in school forever. I know it feels like it. There's still 4 more days till summer vacation starts, but it's a season. Your school days had a beginning, and there will be a last day of school. It's a season of life. If you're in your 20s, you're not going to be in your 20s forever. Some of us realize that the hard way, but you won't be. It's a season of life. It had a beginning. It'll come to an end. If you have babies at home in diapers, you're not going to have babies at home in diapers forever. It's a season. It had a beginning. It'll have an end. Thought there'd be more cheering for that one, but we understand you haven't slept much. We get that. We're glad you're here. If you're out of work right now, you're in a season of unemployment. It's not forever. It had a beginning, and it will come to an end. Maybe you're in a season of grieving because recently you lost something important. Maybe you lost a job. Maybe you lost a friendship. Maybe you lost an opportunity. Maybe you lost a marriage. Maybe you lost a loved one. But when we lose something important, that puts us in a season of grieving. It's not going to last forever. It's a season. It had a beginning, and it will come to an end. That is not to say that seasons are inconsequential or trivial. Seasons shape you. They impact you for life. Just like in nature, a really harsh winter or a dry summer will shape a plant for life, or it'll leave marks in the rings of a tree. Your seasons of life shape you. But seasons are temporary, and they don't last forever. So right now, this morning, what season of life are you in? With that in mind, I want to set us up for where we're going to go with this series. And what I want to talk about is something that's true of life, and that is that seasons are a normal part of life. This is the rhythm with which God designed life to work. There are seasons that begin and seasons end so that new seasons can begin. Now, it's a little bit easier to understand this concept from nature, because in nature, when seasons change, there's very obvious clues that we're moving to a new season. The leaves change color, and hey, there's a clue. I think fall is here. The first snow flies of winter. Hey, I think winter's coming. Then 4 months later, we can see the ground again. I think spring is coming, and the Harleys come out. There's a clue. Spring's coming, and then mosquitoes show up, and there's a clue. We hit summer in Wisconsin. There are clues in season that let us know the season is changing, and many times we greet seasonal changes with anticipation or excitement. Some of you love the first snowfall of December because you start thinking about Christmas. Or some of you love seeing the Harleys come out in spring because, oh yeah, summer barbecue time is coming up. We get excited about that. The first day of March when the temperature hits 40 degrees, my boys want to wear shorts to school, right? They're like, Dad, can we wear shorts today? And I'm a good dad, so I say, why do you want to wear shorts today? Because it's so hot out. I mean, my kids have totally grown up in Wisconsin. You can tell they're just from here now. And I'm maybe not a very good dad because I say, but you'll be cold on the playground. And they respond by saying, no, I won't. So I say, all right, go ahead. What's the worst that'll happen? You'll be cold on the playground. And then Kathy gets a phone call from the school nurse about, I don't know, something about wearing pants in this weather. Anyway, we're excited for the seasonal changes, and normally we adapt to the seasonal changes, don't we? When winter's coming, some of you put snow tires on, or you get a snowblower tuned up for the winter. When spring comes, you buy a new swimming suit. We adapt as the seasons change. But for some reason, in our personal lives, when seasons of our personal lives change, we're not as clued in to the clues. I think I'm going through a season of transition right now. We're not as excited always to move into a new stage or a new season of life. We don't always adapt as quickly as we should when life seasons change. Now, you've seen this in the lives of other people. It's very easy to see in the lives of other people. You probably can think of someone, you probably know someone who stayed in an unhealthy relationship for way longer than they should have been in that relationship. and the clues were there, and you talked to your girlfriend or you talked to your buddy and you said, man, the clues are here. It is time for this relationship to come to an end. But for whatever reason, they couldn't adapt to a new season, and they stayed in that relationship, and it hurt them emotionally. It hurt them psychologically. It might have even have hurt them physically. Or maybe you can think about how businesses struggle with this idea. When industries transition, when new technologies, when disruptive ideas emerge, sometimes businesses are very reluctant to embrace what's new and let go of what's old because they had a product and they had the market cornered on it, but then the whole industry changes, and instead of adapting with it, their business goes under. I think of Kodak. 20 years ago, Kodak was synonymous with cameras. They owned the film industry, but there were clues. Hey, the lifespan, the season of film cameras is coming to a close. Digital's about to explode, and they didn't adapt to a new season. And the most powerful camera film company that had the revenue, that had all the resources to make the transition and thrive into a new season, didn't adapt. And they became obsolete. We struggle in life to see the clues to adapt to a new season. Churches are infamous for doing this. In church world, we keep ministries going long past the time when they have been effective. Ministry works in a season, but then the season changes and we see the clues and people aren't being impacted anymore, but we just kind of fossilize around what worked in the past and what we've always done, and we don't transition to the new season, and as a result, churches become obsolete. We struggle to adapt to changes in our lives. And as a result, we get hurt, we miss out on growth opportunities, and we stay stuck in the wrong season. So in this series, my goal is to help you embrace, first of all, the reality that seasons are a normal part of life. God designed your life to have seasons. And my goal is to help you gain a little bit more competency in recognizing when seasons are changing in your life. Recognize which seasons are coming to an end, and recognize which seasons need to be brought to an end. And how to gracefully move forward to the next season that God has planned for you. Because new things can't grow if you're stuck in the old season. Now, this is not my idea. I did not come up with this. This idea came from a man by the name of Solomon. King Solomon lived about 3,000 years ago. He wrote 3 major volumes of literature that have survived to this day. They've been collected as part of the Scriptures. He wrote the book of Proverbs, Song of Solomon, and Ecclesiastes. Now, the book of Proverbs is just filled with practical wisdom for life. You might want to give a copy to your 16-year-old and say, here, read this, figure out what it says. It'll just help you in life. It's just helpful. Song of Solomon, do not give that to a 16-year-old because it is about a pretty intense love relationship. So maybe when they're 36 and have kids, they can read that one. But today, we're going to be in a book called Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes was a piece of literature Solomon wrote, and the purpose was to discover the meaning of life. Now, Solomon was the perfect person to write on this topic because he was smarter than almost anyone who ever lived. He was wealthier than almost anyone who ever lived. He was more influential than almost anyone who ever lived. And he was a king, and he didn't have any nearby rivals internationally. So he had plenty of free time on his hands. So for a season of his life, he dedicated his life to discovering the meaning of life. And in his little experiment, he became both the researcher and the subject. And he said, what if we had absolutely no assumptions about life? What if we just experimented to find it? And that's what he did for a season of his life. And if this sounds familiar, last summer I preached 4 weeks on the book of Ecclesiastes and his search for meaning in life. But today I want to look at a chapter of Ecclesiastes that we didn't get to last summer. And it is so powerful in unpacking this idea of seasons of life. Now, if you're not a Bible person, you might notice that when I read these words, they sound familiar, and you'll think to yourself, I've never read a Bible. Where have I heard this before? It's because the 1960s band, the Byrds, B-Y-R-D-S, the Byrds. It's the thing they did in the 60s, the Beatles with two E's and Birds. I don't know. All the cool kids did it back then. They wrote a song, and for the lyrics of their song, Turn, 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 they lifted the lyrics right out of the King James Version of the Bible, and they just sang this chapter of the Bible, and it became a hit song. So if it sounds familiar, that's why, but we want to pay attention to what Solomon teaches us about the different seasons of life. So we're in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Solomon wrote, "There is a time for everything." Now, I want you to see this word time here. The Hebrew word for time that Solomon chose, that he used here, that is a word that carries the implication of it's a set time, an appointed time, a designated time. There is a set time for everything. There is a time for everything, and here's our series idea, a season for every activity under the heavens. Now, he could just stop right there and say, okay, got it, we go through different seasons of life. But I'm just going to read this. I'm going to let this literature speak to you. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones, and in ancient times, if soldiers invaded a country, they would all pick up a rock, and when they went by a field of crops, they would throw a rock in it, and that by the time everybody walked by, you couldn't grow crops there anymore. That's what that's talking about. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. There is a designated time, a set time, an appropriate time for every activity under heaven. Solomon is saying, here's the reality of life. There's a day to be born, and there's a day to die. There is a day you bring something home that's new. There's a day you put it on the curb. There's a day when you can't stop laughing. There's a day when you can't stop crying. There's a day you can't stop dancing. There's a day you can't stop grieving. There's a day you're a windshield. There's a day you're a bug. That's what he's saying. There is a season for every activity under heaven. And if we don't learn to see this in our lives, we will be engaged in the wrong behaviors in the seasons that we're in. Now, as we break this down, I want to show you that Solomon gives us 4 aspects of seasons that are important for us to recognize. If you're taking notes in your program, there's 4 fill-in-the-blanks behind this section. The first one that we see is this. Every season has a beginning and an ending. Now, that's pretty obvious, but it's important to say. Every season of life has a beginning and it has an ending. The season is now over. There's a day when the kid heads off to school. There's a day when a kid graduates. This context helps us understand that nothing in life under the sun is intended to last forever. We need to be aware seasons come and seasons go. This will make us wise to realize and look for what's the next season, what are the clues that this season is ending, how do I get to the next season? Because it is in the next season we have opportunities for future growth. Second thing we need to note is this. Every season has unique priorities. Okay, now let's go back to nature. Think of a farmer. In the spring, a farmer has unique priorities for the spring season. He needs to get the seeds planted. He needs to get those seedlings protected. He needs to dedicate his resources towards new initiatives, the future planning for a big harvest. When the summer season comes, he has new priorities. He needs to protect what has taken root. He needs to send resources, fertilizer, water towards nurturing and developing. He needs to pull out weeds and protect from threats. The summer is a season for tending to what has started to grow, to tend to what has taken root. The fall season comes, new priorities in the fall season. We've got a harvest. We are under a time crunch, and we have to get that crop out of the field and into storage so we can sell it. Winter season, new priorities. Time to settle accounts, square things away with lenders, update or fix any machinery that needs attention, and plan what's going to happen next year as we take inventory on the past year. Now, any farmer knows that's just common sense. You have different priorities at different seasons. The same thing is true in everyday life. Every season has unique priorities. If you're in finance, you understand that if there is a bubble in any sector of the economy or in real estate, it's fall. It is time to harvest and get ready because winter's coming. It is not springtime behavior that are appropriate in a bubble in the economy. You don't want to start planting when there's a bubble. You want to harvest and get ready for winter. And when winter comes, you're not surprised because you know seasons are part of life. That's just how things work. Marriages fail because couples don't recognize the seasons are changing. So when a couple meets, they're in love and it is springtime in that relationship. And they are planting and they are sowing, hopefully not too much sowing, and they are just investing in this relationship, and there is a big, bright future. And they get married and they're newlyweds, and it's wonderful, but pretty soon they need to make the transition into summer season where they have to tend to and nurture what has taken root. If they never transition to summer, they're never going to enjoy a harvest. Some people just want to keep acting like their relationship should be springtime all the time, and it should be new and exciting and wonderful all the time, and when it isn't, they don't understand. And some people, they go and sow elsewhere because that's what they think their relationship should be. But couples who understand, our relationship goes through seasons. Those are the couples that can go through springtime planting and summertime tending and enjoy a great harvest season in marriage and then go right back through the cycles again. That's what a healthy relationship does. It's what healthy people do. We recognize that in my current season, some things take higher priority, some activities, some behaviors take higher priority than other behaviors. Not for now or not forever, just for now, because that's the season we're in. So, every season has a beginning and an ending. Every season has unique priorities. Third thing that's true here, season endings can be hard. It can be so hard to recognize and acknowledge and end a season of life. This is the reason why many women will stay in an abusive relationship. Because the idea of walking out the door into the unknown, away from what is familiar, away from what is known, is too scary and it is too intimidating. And because it is hard, she remains in a season that is destroying her in every way. Sometimes season endings are hard because they are forced upon you. It might be the death of a loved one. It might be the loss of a job. You couldn't see this season coming. It just showed up in your life, and it just knocks you off kilter. And you feel like you're in a tailspin, and you don't know what to do, and your whole world is spinning, and you're struggling with it because it's hard to end a season. Other times, we see the ending of the season coming, and we know it's coming, and you can see the clues, but man, if you're going to end the season, it means you're going to have to end a relationship. You're going to have to hurt somebody's feelings. You're going to have to let somebody go. You're going to have to uproot something that you planted. And you put your sweat and your blood and your tears into this venture, into this relationship, into this project, and you can see that it's coming to an end, but I don't know, to end it, it's going to cost you your pride, it's going to cost you maybe your respect. It's hard sometimes to end seasons, and that's why so many of us struggle, even when we see a season is coming to an end, to end it and move on to the next. Fourth thing we see is this: endings are necessary for new seasons to begin. You cannot enter a new season of growth in life until the old season has come to an end. You can't get the crops growing in the spring until winter has come to an end. It's always tricky in the month of May, isn't it? When does the last frost hit? You gardeners, you pay so much attention to that. When is it safe to get those plants in the ground? Because you know if the old season hasn't ended, the new one's not going to work very well. You can't move on to the new season until the old one is ended. The same is true in our lives. When it comes to relationships, when it comes to opportunities. We don't grow as people until we move on to new seasons, and we can't move on till the old season has ended. In the Bible, I think of Abraham. Abraham was called by God into a new season of life, but he couldn't begin that new season until he left his father's home, he left his country, he left everything that was familiar, and he had to step out into the unknown to enter this new season. Yet God would use that new season to bless Abraham and be part of his plan for sending Jesus to save the world. I can think of this in my own life. 8 years ago, I started a new season of life when I moved across the country to become the pastor of this church. Now, when I did that, that began personally my biggest personal growth season ever. I have grown more in the last 8 years than in any 8 years of my life. I've matured more, I've learned more, I've discovered more, I've been stretched more. But this season would never have begun unless I ended another season. I had to leave a city I loved, a church I loved, people I loved. That season had to end for this new season to begin. Endings are necessary in life for new seasons to begin. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily, as you end a season of life, as you end a relationship, it doesn't necessarily mean the person was bad or the season was bad. It just means that it has come to an end. And now it's time for the new to begin. Well, Solomon's not done. He introduces this big idea of seasons in life. And hopefully you're all thinking about, what season am I in? You're already thinking, what does need to end? But we'll get there. Don't worry. We'll get there in this series. He's not done yet. He wants to introduce one more very important idea, and then we'll get to your homework at the end of our time today. So here's what he says next in verse 9. What do workers gain from their toil? Some of you are thinking, yeah, I've always wondered that myself. Well, what am I getting? Because the faster I run, I seem to be on a treadmill. I'm working harder, but I don't seem to be gaining any forward progress. He asks the question because he just said, oh, just so you know, everything comes to an end. How does the guy feel who invented 8 tracks? What did you get from all your toil? I don't know. I mean, they're in a museum somewhere, I guess, right? But, we went from vinyl to 8 tracks to cassettes to CDs to MP3s. Well, whatever you work on, a lot of it becomes obsolete. The next generation takes it further, faster. And what exactly are we getting if at the end of it we all die anyway and it's all seasonal and we stop working and, the earth blows up someday? What do we get from all of our toil? Now, if all you understand about life is there's seasons and seasons end and then we end, the answer is a paycheck. And what do you do with a paycheck? I buy a car. Why do you need a car? To drive to work? Why do you go to work? To get a paycheck for what? To make my car payment? What do we get for all our toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. You ready for the burden? Here's the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Now, this is that same word, time, that designated time, that appointed time, that set time. What's the burden God has laid on the human race? He made everything beautiful in His time. What does that mean? The word beautiful in Hebrew can also be translated as excellent. In other words, he's recapping what he just said. There is a excellent beauty, but it's only for a time. It's only for a season. Laughing is excellent. It's beautiful, but only in the proper season. Weeping is excellent. It is beautiful, but only in the proper season. And the great frustration we have as human beings is the season comes, and as soon as we figure it out, off it goes again. Okay, now I've got this season dialed in, and off it goes again. Okay, finally, I'm used to being a stay-at-home mom, and I'm raising kids, and off they go to school. The season ends. And it's hard, and she doesn't want her kids to go to school. And they go off to school, and then it's not so bad, and then she gets used to that stage, and then the kids get older, and then she gets used to that stage, and then they cost more money, and she gets used to that stage, and by the time she gets used to a stage, the stage goes on, and then they barely remember to call her on Mother's Day. What do we get from all of our toil? He made everything beautiful in its time. There's a season for everything, but then the season, it's gone. That's the burden we have. It's all temporal. It's all fleeting. And he says, He has also set eternity in the human heart. He has also set eternity in the human heart. What Solomon is writing here is this. Intuitively, we know that there is more to life than this life. Intuitively, we understand there should be more to life than this life. That's why in all the seasons, even when we find what is beautiful, even when we find what is excellent in a season of life, there's still something about it that doesn't fully bring the satisfaction it promised. It doesn't bring the fulfillment we're looking for. There's a deep longing for something that nothing in this world can finally and fully satisfy. Solomon says, yeah, it's because God who made you, He put eternity in your heart. This is why every culture and civilization has always had some understanding of life after death. God set eternity in our hearts. That the frustration of seasons would lead us to be keenly aware of the fact that there should be something more to this life than this life. He says, He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet, and here's the frustrating thing, no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Because our seasons keep changing. It's like when you're watching TV with your dad and just flip, and you start, okay, well, flip, there it goes again. But Dad, what are you looking for? A show, click, right? We don't know what you're looking for, Dad, okay? We give up. That's what it feels like God is doing. We can't see it, but remember, God sits enthroned in heaven above the seasons of life. And He can see the first season, and He can see the last season, and He sees all the seasons in between, and He looks at your life, and He sees all the seasons of your life. We go through them season by season. God sees them all, and He says, here's what you don't understand, or here's what we lose sight of. From the beginning, I orchestrated these seasons to lead to an ending. See, from the beginning, God said, I made human beings, and I made them to live with me and in my presence. And I made them so that the joy and wonder and satisfaction and beauty of your heart would find fulfillment in me. That you would look at me and your jaw would drop and you would be filled with the understanding that God is excellent, God is wonderful, God is awesome, God is amazing, God leads me to worship. I find my meaning and my satisfaction in God. God said that was the beginning. And then what happened in the next season was that human being said, but maybe something on earth can give me that too. Maybe something on earth can give me wonder and meaning and satisfaction and contentment and peace like God can. So that's what we did. We turned our worship away from God to things in the world that God created, and we fell into sin. That's what sin is. It is to fail to find our ultimate beauty, satisfaction, meaning, purpose, wonder, and worship in God, but in something God created instead. So God did something about that. In the New Testament, Paul, who wrote many books of the New Testament, said, "But when the time had fully come," when the appointed time had fully come, in the proper season, God sent His Son, Jesus, to redeem us who had fallen into sin, to redeem us who had fallen into the worship of things God created rather than God. And that's what Jesus did at the right time. In the fullness of time, Jesus came to this earth, and Jesus lived for you, and Jesus died on a cross for you, so that through Him we are forgiven, we are redeemed, we are brought back into the presence of God, and He takes that eternity He set in our hearts, and He turns our hearts back towards Him, and He says, "This is your future. This is all leading somewhere. All these seasons in life you're going through, the good seasons, the bad seasons, the seasons of laughing, the seasons of mourning, they're going somewhere. They are ultimately leading to the fulfillment I have for you in eternity, and through faith in Jesus Christ, you have an eternity with God, where it'll be like He designed it to be. Jaws dropped, eyes wide, amazement, as we say, you are the beauty that fills my heart. We love natural landscapes and majestic mountains and rivers and oceans because the beauty fills our hearts and gives us wonder. We're going to see God and say, "Oh, you are the most beautiful thing, more beautiful than I could imagine." And our worship will be of Him, and our joy will be in Him, and our satisfaction will come from Him from beginning to end. God has a purpose for all of the seasons, and they are leading for His glory to be known by those who trust in Christ. Solomon continues. Verse 14. I know that everything God does, not we who are stuck in the seasons of life under the sun, I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, and nothing taken from it. Why? Because He's God. It's like trying to get the remote out of Dad's hands. He's going to do it. Just let Him go. Solomon says, I know that whatever God does, it's going to go forever. His plan will not be thwarted. What He said the end will be, God will bring it to that end. God does it so that people will fear Him, so that we will revere Him, so that we will be in awe and wonder of Him. In all of the seasons, He's saying, lift your eyes to see the destination that God has for you in Jesus Christ. So, for the rest of this series, I want to give you some tools and give you some insight that we find in the Scriptures on how to recognize, I think this season is coming to an end. On how to have the skills to bring seasons to an end gracefully, so that you can move forward into the next season God has planned for you on our journey towards heaven by God's grace. But before I leave you today, you do have homework, because I do want you to start thinking about this. And if you do your homework, you don't have to turn it in next week. If you're new here, I hand out homework. It's like you don't turn it in, just so you know. This will help you get the most out of the next 3 parts of this series, so I hope you carve out a little bit of time this week to think about this homework assignment. It's just going to be helpful for you. I don't get anything from it. So here's the homework I want you to think about this week. In your life, and this is specifically when it comes to seasons, I want you to begin to think about which seasons in your life have come to an end and you haven't acknowledged it, or need to come to an end, or they're about to come to an end and you need to prepare for it. Okay, that's the point of this homework. And while I'm showing you the 4 fill-in-the-blanks here, the illustration or the idea I want you to have in your head is the idea of a rose bush, a gardener and a rose bush, okay? Because when a gardener has a prize rose bush, he knows that this rose bush will produce more buds than it can sustain, so he cuts off some of the buds so that others can grow and get all the nourishment they need. He understands that sometimes branches get sick, and you need to prune those away. He understands that sometimes branches die, you need to prune those away. You need to prune a rose bush so that it can grow into its fullness and maturity. The same is true in your life. You need to prune away seasons or aspects in your life so you can thrive in a season and achieve the fullness that God has intended for you. So, with that in mind, here's the questions I have for you as you think about which seasons or behaviors in your life need to end. Number one is this: what is good but not best? What is good but not best? In your life, there are things that are good, there are relationships that are good, there are opportunities that are good. There are hobbies that are good. They're not bad, they're not wicked, they're not evil, they're not sinful. They're good. But in your season, they're not best. Are some of those good opportunities taking away resources from your best opportunities, your best relationships, your best investments of your time? See, life by its nature produces more life than it can sustain, just like the rose bush. Your life will produce more opportunities, more hobbies, more ventures, more things than you can possibly resource with your limited time and energy and dollars. So do you have things in your life? They're good, but they're not best. You don't have to do anything with the answer to this question, but I think you should at least know the answer to the question. In fact, I don't think you should do anything this week. Let's get a couple more weeks into the series, but we're just gaining awareness right now. Second, what is sick and won't get well? If you have a gardener with a rose bush, there's some branches that get sick. You just have to cut them off because they're not going to get better, and that disease can spread to the rest of the bush. In your life, is there something that's sick and you've tended to it and you've tended to it and you've invested in it and it's not going to get better? Maybe it's a relationship with a family member or a friend. And it's dysfunctional and you know it's dysfunctional and you've tried to bring them around and build them up again and you love them, but it's just not going to get better. What is sick and it's not going to get well? Now, definitely do not do anything with this week, all right? This is just awareness. In 2 weeks, we're going to talk about something that's very important in life when it comes to the understanding what's sick and won't get well. Because a wise man named Kenny Rogers once said, you've got to know when to hold them, and you've got to know when to fold them. And that is so hard to do, isn't it? And you have to know when to walk away, but that's another series. How do you know when to invest and how do you know when to cut up? We're going to talk about that in 2 weeks, so don't miss that. Third one, what is already dead that must be cut off? There is something in your life, it is just taking up space, if you're honest. Its season has long passed, but you're just having a hard time cutting it out. Maybe it's for sentimental reasons, maybe you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, but its day is gone. What is dead that you need to cut off? And finally, what behaviors are inappropriate for your season? See, it's inappropriate for the farmer to harvest in summer. That's a fall season activity. There are priorities in every season, and as you think about your season, you should have crystal clear priorities, not forever, just for now, in this season of life. And again, doesn't mean they're bad, doesn't mean they're sinful, doesn't mean they're evil, but it's just inappropriate for the season. This might be a hobby. This might be a spending habit. This might be the hours you work. This might be something to do with your physical health. This might have to do with your Bible reading. This might have to do with an app on your phone. Okay, I don't know. But what behaviors are inappropriate given the season that you are in today? Now, don't do anything with it this week, but you need to be aware of it going forward in this series. We're going to pick it up there next time. Let's pray. Father, thank you that in the Scriptures we have this incredible wisdom that you gave us through the pen of Solomon. And it's easy to talk about, but it is so hard to see this clearly and objectively in our own lives, Lord, because we get so caught up in emotions, and we get so caught up in fears, and we get so caught up in worries about what people think of us or who's going to get hurt. So, Father, I ask that today we will see our lives from your perspective, that you've been doing something from the beginning to a destination you have for us at the end. And with your perspective, we'll recognize you want us to have seasons in life, and we're all in different seasons. So give us the wisdom to recognize the season you have appointed for us at this time. Give us the courage to transition to the seasons you would have us live in. We ask this in the name of our Savior Jesus, who has a great future for us. Amen.